And yes, that's why I deviated from my usual once per 2 days upload schedule. I held back this commentary video just to get that intro up and going. Hope you like it. I find that I'm making all sorts of different kinds of videos. There are deck building videos, commentary videos, jank deck videos, and competitive videos. Um, I and having an intro to identify which is always very nice. So that's exactly what I'm going to do. So strategic innovations is quite a loaded phrase, but basically it refers to most of my games, which is building a tier 1.5 or tier 2 deck that is not a conventional top tier deck like Astrobiotics, Food Codes. You go off the course, like with this deck, Gagarin Deep Space, and try to make it as good as possible. So it's not complete jank, but it's something that you can bring to a tournament and potentially win, but it's not the most optimal. There might be a couple of hard counters, as mentioned. If you watch my previous video, you know that this is very weak to Val, Valencia, and Noise especially. And today I'll be facing that matchup in Gagarin versus Valencia. If you haven't seen my previous video, be sure to check it out because that is where I explain most of my card choices for this deck. Alright, we have a lot of content to cover today, so let's get down to it right now. I have a very good opening hand, no agendas. Money, 2 money cards, 2 protection upgrades, only 1 ice, but that will do. Ice Wall obviously goes on HQ in case I'm playing against DLR Siphon. Don't want to deal with that. And we get the paywall out ASAP. Now this might not be a good idea. If he top decks an agenda off R&D, I might be in trouble. Losing my paywall that early is not good. But he hits HQ instead, and I happily let him in. 2 important reasons why I let him into HQ. Firstly, I have no agenda, so it's fine. More importantly, I do not want to show him the ice on HQ because he can easily whip out a Corroder and siphon me through. Or whip out a Faust and easily siphon me. I don't want him to know that HQ is vulnerable to siphon. So I'll leave that as it is. Of course, I do have a Christian Grid which I can place on HQ to stop the siphon, but I do not want to do so. I want to wait until somewhat later on where HQ becomes taxing. There's not much point putting a Christian on HQ if you're not going to make it too taxing just yet. And now I place the Christian on HQ because I do have an Oaktown in hand, so I do intend to res Ice Wall on HQ. As you saw, yes, there was a Merumati on R&D because that was the second ice I drew. Obviously it goes on R&D because there was no R&D ice, but sadly it meant that it doesn't get a 3 strength bonus from not being on HQ. Which is very sad, it's so pathetic. Not being able to capitalize on Merumati's strength. Because of that, I was basically paying for an overpriced ice wall that my opponent easily parasited down, forcing me to place a new archer on the R&D. In the meantime, he does get an Atlas out, which is a huge pain, and he continues hammering R&D. I mean, he has been giving me a couple of paywall credits, but now that paywall is gone, I need to find a better solution. Archer does not hold because I do not have any agenda points yet, so it's time for the Toll Booth on R&D. Toll Booth Archer should keep him out for a decently long time. But the Faust comes. So now I'm very worried about account siphon. You'll notice that the Christian Grid is res on HQ because I wanted to make use of the root credits. So this is the combo coming into play. Once you get Breakaway Grid and the root, you start generating lots of money. And here I should have gained 1 extra credit for installing a new ice on the remote server. I forgot to do that. Unfortunately, it's not automated by Jinteki, so very carelessly forgot. And I do use 1 recurring credit to res the ice wall. So basically, I have 11 credits in my pool. I probably won't use too many of them, because the root should fuel me for the rest of the game, which is pretty cool. And of course, the best thing is when you draw your second copy of the root, which means that you can actually trash your existing root and start advancing agendas. Then when you want to continue setting up your board state, you just toss the root back into the server. It only costs 1 to res with Breakaway Grid. That's the amazing thing. So my HQ gets parasited down, unfortunately, and he ninjas the other Oaktown from my hand. So bringing him up to 4 points very quickly, that's not a good sign for me. But at least I have an agenda that works, assuming he doesn't find a blackmail, that is. I'm very worried about that. The blackmail threat is something I'm very conscious about, but thankfully there was none. So I was able to safely advance the agenda out. The question is, do I want to over advance the Atlas? That is always the question to ask if you have a double advance Oaktown. The answer here was no, because I wanted to keep the pressure up force him to blackmail my remote this time in case it's an Atlas. It's not, it's simply another copy of the root, but instead he doesn't blackmail my server, he chooses instead to set up with the pancakes combo. Good for him. I begin by seeing a public support. Now that is something that I can install, and now that I found the eyes to protect the public support, I'm going to do so. So this is what I intended as my board state. You have a double remote going on, where one is your money remote and one's your scoring remote. Ideally, your money remote should be thicker than your scoring remote, but well, this works as well. A Caduceus into public support is actually really painful for Valencia. One that doesn't run Mimic, because Faust requires 3 cards to break through, or 2 cards and allowing the corp to gain 3 credits, both of which are not desirable. And at the end of the day, you still have to pay loads of cash to trash that public support. So I'll take that any day. I do spend 8 credits to rest the toll booth, mitigated by the root, so it only costs 5, and it still costs my opponent 3 credits of toll booth tax. My mandatory draw drew me into Cyberdex Virus Suite, so that could be useful. And the best thing is it combos very nicely with both the root and Breaker Bay Grid. So I place it in the Breaker Bay Grid server. So now it is very stacked, and he brings a Parasite out. Cyberdex in the Breaker Bay Grid server serves 2 purposes. Firstly, it protects against Parasite and Data Sucker shenanigans, like what's happening right now. After about 2 more turns, I can rest the Cyberdex to bring him down to 0. The more important issue right here is that I can pretend to have a very secure remote when I don't actually. All I have is an Ash protecting the remote. Once he gets past Ash, the entire server is his. But there's another thing I need to be conscious about. Each of these cards costs 1 extra credit to access. That's so painful for the runner. I didn't really look at this from his perspective, and hence I paid 1 extra credit to boost the Ash trace, which I didn't need to. I never really needed to boost any traces on these 2 runs, but I ended up boosting the Ash trace by 1 and the Caduceus and the run trace by 1 because I was so afraid he would completely wreck my remote server. I shouldn't have boosted the trace. I should have just let him in and forced him to spend all his credits to clear my remote. That would have been ideal. Unfortunately, since he gets my Ash, it means that I can't actually score agendas in that remote anymore. I have to be conscious of the blackmail threat, of which he has 2 more left in his deck. So, what do I do here? I draw into an agenda. Global Food is not very good, but instead of protecting HQ here, I leave HQ wide open, because it's pretty obvious by this point, since he has played Clone Chip, that he's not running a Siphon DLR deck, which means that he probably has no form of HQ pressure. So I'm more than happy with him coming oh no, he's coming to HQ. That's not good, but thankfully he missed the Global Food. He did not trash the Christian Grid, and in any case this means he doesn't get a sucker counter, because it was not a successful run. So he was looking for a sucker counter, and so he ran Archives before running R&D to trash my toll booth with Data Sucker. But I showed him the Cyberdex in the remote. He parasited my toll booth down too quickly, so we had to rewind the entire thing. So that's the problem with Jinteki. It goes a bit too quickly, whereas on Octagon it's much easier to rewind. But never mind that, at least it's rewindable, and the game goes on. So basically, he failed to burn down my toll booth, and that was a huge loss for him because the toll booth tax brought him down to 0 credits. This meant that, very importantly, this gives me a very huge scoring window, which I really should have capitalized on. The problem with scoring windows is that they are not very obvious against Valencia. You have to hope that they don't have blackmail. This was actually a perfect time to install Double Advanced Global Food. As it turned out post-game, my opponent revealed that he did not have blackmail in hand. I should have went for the Global Food here, but I didn't, and that was probably a mistake. I really had to risk it at this point. By not risking it, I'm putting myself very far behind, because now my opponent is starting to gain a lot of ground with 2 cards per turn and a KD Jones getting ticking away. There is very little that my Ice Suite can do to counter Valencia once she gets set up, and I'm in a lot of trouble when that happens. It doesn't help that Gagarin's ability is somewhat neutered by Valencia. Blackmail threat is really the nail in the coffin, because I can't foreseeably defend that remote properly to score my agendas, and I can't fast advance either. So I'm caught between a rock and a hard place. What do? I don't actually have that many lines of play left. The only thing that is stopping me from hemorrhaging agendas at this point is Tollbooth and Archer on R&D, which is proving to be a very secure way of keeping the runner out. And slowly but surely, it becomes painfully obvious that my opponent's running Regas Valencia with SMCs to bring out her breakers, so that can't be good for me. I continue fortifying my remote. I'm not sure how much this will do, honestly, considering that yeah, Valencia just will blackmail through my remote. At this point, basically, it's deterrent. It's deterrence from running regularly. The builder is actually kind of a mistake. Usually you want builder into ice wall or builder into firewall on a central server rather than a remote server, because runners won't frequently run your remote servers. It's way too taxing for them. So this is not an ideal setup, and to complicate matters, it's probably not going to help because blackmail. So yes, blackmail is being very oppressive right now, and I'm just treading water at this point. I can't score agendas. And yeah, I'm basically at this point I'm just looking for Ash right now, because Ash is the only form of defensive remote upgrade I have. I'm looking for Ash, and I want it so badly that I'm going to reshuffle the only Ash in my archives back into my deck. Hopefully I can find it again. That really is my only hope. The other hope is to continuously spam unadvanced cards in my remotes, hoping that he'll run them. So you see here, I play a Jackson. With the existing Jackson, I double draw. That Jackson was meant to lure him to that remote, but he didn't fall for the bait. I think I trashed the route to install that Jackson so as to bait him, but he didn't fall for it. It's the never advance game, and that's what I'm trying to play. It doesn't pay off very well because Wayland doesn't have that many 3-2 agendas. It's a problem, isn't it? Well, there's a bigger problem, and that is that Parasite slowly but surely taking up on that Tollbooth. With his data sucker counter, he can easily smash through my Tollbooth. I might be in a bit of trouble. So he gets a Liberator accounts out, liberates some money off, gets a clone chip, and things are looking more and more grim for me. I still haven't seen an Atlas. If I'd seen an Atlas by this point, I would definitely chuck it into one of my remotes. A very sneaky thing to do would be to place the Atlas in the rightmost remote, because he would think it's a money card or public support, when in fact it is an agenda. And that's another good thing about public support, it can masquerade as an Atlas. Is it an Atlas? Is it not? There's only one way to find out. Well, he really wants my Tollbooth gone so badly that he's willing to spend 2 parasites on it. Well, he's gonna get it this time, but at a cost. He chooses to continue the run, and I'm gonna make sure he slams into my Archer. It doesn't matter whether he has access to David or not, because he only has 2 credits to spend. So I happily sack my public support for the best ice in the game. I didn't really like Archer in the initial iteration of this deck because there was no hostile takeover, but clearly it's the MVP right here. It is going to cause him a lot of trouble. Do I get to fire it off, or will he use Faust to break it? He only has 2 choices at this point. Either way, it's a lose-lose for him. He either loses all his programs, or loses 4 cards from hand. 5 cards if he wants to break the end of the run as well. So that is a very tough proposition for my opponent. Unfortunately, when you think about it, it doesn't really slow him down that much, because he has the wild size pancake combo up. So yeah, it's not that disruptive. The worst thing is that he loses some cards that he really wants to use. Let's see what he chucks here. He chucks an iPad Worse, a medium, which is always nice to see go in the bin, a daily cast, well, he doesn't need the money, a Corroder, now that's what you want to see. I don't want him to get a Corroder and blitz through my ice walls. And he trashes a Mimic as well. His solution to the Caduceus is gone. So that's great. I'm gonna get my 2 credits, and he will get his well-deserved access, but at what cost? Really, at what cost? And this is the perfect time to score an agenda. I should have seen that. This is the perfect time to score an agenda, but I can't because the public support is taking up the remote. Public support, you're so annoying. In retrospect, I should have put the public support in the second remote, and this will allow me to play the Global Food Initiative on my first remote. Oh, well, not much I can do about that. This is actually really a perfect time to score that Global Food Initiative. Sure, he could have top decked Blackmail or something, but well, I should have gone for it, I really should. And he runs through my archer with a David and gets a medium out because he wants to end the game on R&D. I'm not sure why he's playing so aggressively, but well, it's working. It's placing a lot of pressure on me to actually score out. I'm back to 2 agenda points, still nowhere near to accomplishing my goal. I just can't find a scoring window. Against Blackmail, how do you do so? I guess I really need Executive Bootcamp in this deck. I've thought of some other ways to counter Valencia, but yes, Valencia does need countering, and it is Executive Bootcamp that is needed. Elizabeth Mills works fine, but it doesn't do anything against most other runners, so I wouldn't play that. Bootcamp works much better. It allows you to rest your remote eyes and create a unblackmailable remote to start scoring in. I think that's a good idea. Now, what happens here? He takes a lot of money off KT and trashes my paywall by scoring the 3rd agenda in NAPD. So now I'm basically in hot sauce, all kinds of trouble. 2 Jacksons are gone, there's still a global food in my hand, and I have no way to score out. I think I'm done. At this point, I'm just waiting for the game to end. Or am I? I don't know. We shall see. I do get a second public support off. Well, one has already been sacked to Archer, but getting on 3 points is good. This means I can win on double Atlas. The problem is I haven't seen a single Atlas since the start of the game. That doesn't help. As I said, if I've seen an Atlas by this point, I would just chuck in my remote, and he has shown a lot of reluctance in running my remotes. Although now there's less reason to not run my remotes because he has so many credits he can easily access all the cards if he wants to. But he's not going to. With 3 virus counters on those mediums, I'm sure he has other plans. And I really should respect that threat a lot more. So he attempts to run R&D here, and here I'm forced to rest the firewall. That should keep him out for now. Purging virus counters is definitely on my mind, but I choose not to do so because I have a better line of play in mind. First, I reshuffle Jackson Howard. After a draw, I see an Ash and a hedge fund, so it makes perfect sense. The Ash that I've been looking for is finally there. Or rather, I want to start scoring agendas because, well, I have an Ash in the remote, and I really need to score agendas to win. I can't just sit here and wait for him to bleed me out, but unfortunately purging would have been the right choice because he snaps a parasite on my archer, and I quickly realize there's no way I can stop him here. I tried to be very sneaky here. After he breaks that firewall, I type in the chat box asking him if he really wants to continue. Because the newly installed global food might have been a Cyberdex Virus Suite, but no, it wasn't a Cyberdex Virus Suite. I only run 1 copy of it in this deck. I wasn't able to purge his counters, and as such, he got through the archer. Damn. If I had a Cyberdex Virus Suite, I would actually have murdered his game pretty badly. Yeah, I would have been able to trash 2 programs, or at least 1. Either trash 2 programs or end the run and trash 1 program, both of which are very crippling. And yeah, that would have been all, but instead he finds 2 Atlases off the top of my deck to win. Ouch. What a burn. So there are many gameplay mistakes that I've made that led to my loss. These are just a few of them. The last one is one that I really want to expound on. Deck building to change my deck. Paywall wasn't that effective. I think it paid off less than hedge fund every single time I played it. I wouldn't mind replacing it with some other card to help against blackmail, because I felt that blackmail was really oppressive this game. It basically meant that I could never score anything that wasn't an Atlas, because it would telegraph to the opponent that there's an agenda in there and they'll simply blackmail it once or twice. Get past the Ash if there's an Ash there, and just, ninja the agenda from my hands. So anti-blackmail tech doesn't come in the form of Elizabeth Mills. I think that's too narrow a hit card. I would instead go for Executive Bootcamp. Not only does it allow me to res ice against blackmail, more importantly, it actually synergizes very well with the root. Because I found that I didn't really get as much out of the root as I would have liked. Unlike Adonis campaign, which gives you 3 reliable credits every turn, the root doesn't necessarily pay out 3 every turn. You need to spend those credits on resing ice or installing cards, and I don't do that every single turn. But with Executive Bootcamp, I can do that. If the runner chooses not to run, instead setting up their board state, I can easily use the root's credits. Or an alternative is to ensure that every card that I advance isn't necessarily an agenda. So even if they're forced to run through my eyes for it, paying all their life savings just to get through, they might just hit the end only to realize it's a Grindel Refinery. Or maybe a Contract Killer. Both of these are very strong options in Wayland. Okay, for some definitions of very strong, they're actually pretty mediocre in my opinion, at least compared to Executive Boot Camp. Contract Killer doesn't synergize well with my deck because I don't deal any meat damage, and opponents are very likely to have less than 2 cards in their hand anyway. But more importantly, trashing a connection doesn't help against one of the biggest threats in the current meta, which is DLR Bell. Trashing one connection for 3 clicks, 4 clicks actually, 4 clicks, and I think that's 4 credits or something like that to that effect. It's completely not worth it. I mean, in this particular game, it would have been nice to burn my opponent's 12 loaded KT, but that is the anomaly, not the norm. Grindel Refinery is decent, but it's not like I need that much money to play. The extra money wouldn't really help me, and it is pretty vulnerable on R&D to being trash, so that's what I do not like about it. So that's my deck, and perhaps I'll try to play it again. Although right now it definitely is a pretty good illustration of why Wayland is not that good in the current meta. The ice is just not very good, and more importantly, you can never get a secure remote going for those bigger agendas that you need to score. Thanks for watching, happy net running.